I am Robert Mitchell, 72 years old and somehow still processing the betrayal my own son orchestrated against me. As a retired construction company owner who built Mitchell & Sons from a single truck to a fleet of 40 vehicles, I thought I'd earned loyalty from the son whose name was literally on the building. But 3 weeks after we laid my wife Margaret to rest, he showed up at my door with a briefcase full of papers and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever trusted someone with your life's work only to watch them try to take it from you. Growing up in Detroit during the 60s meant understanding that nothing came easy for a black man trying to build something. But inside the office, Margaret and I designed together with its photographs of every building we'd constructed and every crew we'd employed was a legacy I thought my son understood. The conference room where we used to plan jobs became the battlefield where he tried to convince me I was too old to run my own company. The call came on a Tuesday morning, just as I was going through Margaret's files in our home office. Michael's voice had that rehearsed quality I recognized from his corporate training sessions. "Dad, we need to discuss the transition plan. The company can't wait forever." They hadn't even given me a month to grieve my wife of 48 years before calculating how to extract me from the business we'd built together. "Michael," I said carefully, "there is no transition plan. I'm still CEO." "That's exactly the problem," he replied, and I could hear his wife Amanda coaching him in the background. "The board is concerned about leadership continuity. At your age, after Mom's death, you need to think about what's best for the company." At my age, as if 72 years of living had made me incompetent instead of experienced. "The board?" I asked. "You mean the board that I still control 60% of?" Silence on the other end. Then, "Dad, we're coming over Saturday. We need to talk about this properly." He hung up before I could refuse. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done since Margaret got sick. I went to the office. My office, in the building I'd purchased in 1985 when banks were still redlining black businesses out of commercial real estate. Denise, my assistant of 20 years, looked up from her desk with tears in her eyes when she saw me. "Mr. Mitchell, I didn't expect you back so soon." "Neither did I said. "Denise, I need to see the board meeting minutes from the last 6 months." Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe, or guilt. "Sir," Michael said, "those were confidential executive session materials." "Michael," I said quietly, "doesn't get to decide what the majority shareholder can and cannot see. Please bring me those minutes." What I discovered in those documents made Margaret's death somehow more painful. While she was dying, while I was holding her hand through chemotherapy and radiation, Michael had been holding secret board meetings, discussions about succession planning and leadership transitions and maximizing shareholder value through strategic restructuring. They'd been planning my removal since before Margaret was even gone. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through our house, looking at the life Margaret and I had built. The kitchen where she'd planned menus for company Christmas parties. The den where we'd reviewed contracts together, her sharp mind catching details I'd missed. The bedroom where she'd died, holding my hand, whispering instructions I was only beginning to understand. "Check my desk," she'd said in those final days. "Bottom drawer, left side. When Michael shows his true colors, you'll need what's there." I'd thought she was confused from the medication. Now, standing in her study at 2 in the morning, I understood she'd been clearer than ever. The drawer stuck the way it always had. Inside, beneath old tax returns and company bylaws, I found a pale blue folder marked, "For Robert, when the wolves come." My hands shook as I opened it. The first document was a stock transfer agreement dated 18 months ago. Margaret had transferred her 15% ownership stake in Mitchell & Sons not to Michael, as everyone assumed, but to a trust. The beneficiary, our granddaughter Jasmine, with distribution at age 25. But that wasn't all. Behind that were bank statements showing accounts I'd never known existed. Margaret had been systematically moving money from our joint accounts into separate holdings. Not stealing, every dollar was legally hers to move, but protecting me from something she'd seen coming. The folder contained 6 months of documented phone calls between Michael and his wife, transcribed by a private investigator Margaret had hired. Conversations about forcing me out, selling the company to a corporate buyer, using my grief as leverage to make me sign away control. Once Dad is isolated and vulnerable, Michael had told Amanda, he'll sign anything we put in front of him. Old people always do, old people. He'd reduced his father to a demographic. At the bottom of the folder was a letter in Margaret's handwriting, "My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Michael has shown you exactly who he's become. I've known for 2 years, ever since that business dinner, when he described you as legacy overhead that needed to be restructured out. He learned the language of business, but he never learned the language of family. He sees Mitchell & Sons as an asset to liquidate rather than a legacy to protect. He sees you as an obstacle rather than the man who taught him everything he knows about integrity and hard work. I've been preparing for this. The trust protects Jasmine's inheritance from her father's greed. The separate accounts ensure you'll never be dependent on Michael's generosity. The documentation proves he's been planning this betrayal for years. But more importantly, I've made arrangements for you to discover who you are without the business, without the company, without the daily grind that's defined you for 40 years. There's a property in North Carolina, in the mountains near Asheville. I bought it 5 years ago when we visited for our anniversary. Remember the cabin we stayed in, where you said you could finally breathe? I bought the land next to it, built you a workshop, set up accounts to maintain it. It's yours whenever you need to disappear. Don't let Michael mistake your grief for weakness. Don't let him take what we built just because he learned how to dress corporate theft in business casual. And Robert, teach Jasmine the difference between running a business and running a family. She's watching. Make sure what she learns is worth remembering. All my love, Margaret. I sat in that study until sunrise, reading her letter over and over. Margaret had known. While I was proud of our son's MBA, his corporate success, his beautiful wife and daughter, Margaret had been watching him calculate the value of our deaths. Saturday arrived cold and grey. Michael showed up at noon exactly, Amanda beside him in designer clothes that cost more than most of my workers made in a week. They'd left Jasmine at home, which told me everything I needed to know about the conversation they were planning. "Dad," Michael said, not waiting for an invitation before sitting at my kitchen table. "We've put together a very generous retirement package." He slid a folder across the table. Not blue like Margaret's, but corporate grey, with the Mitchell & Sons logo embossed in gold. "You'd maintain the title of founder and chairman emeritus," Amanda explained in her consultant voice. "Very prestigious. You'd attend board meetings in an advisory capacity, receive a comfortable pension, and most importantly, you'd be free from the daily stress of operations. Free from. As if running the company I'd built was a burden I needed rescuing from. I didn't open the folder. "Who becomes CEO?" I asked. Michael smiled. "I do, of course. I've been grooming for this position my entire career. The board unanimously supports the transition." "Unanimously," I repeated, "including my 60% vote?" "Dad," Michael said with practiced patience, "you haven't attended a board meeting in 4 months. The company needs active leadership. I was watching my wife die," I said quietly. "What's your excuse for plotting against me while I was holding her hand?" The room went silent. Amanda's composure cracked slightly. Michael's jaw tightened. "Dad, that's not fair." "Fair." I stood up, walked to Margaret's study and returned with the blue folder. I set it on the table between us like evidence in a trial. "You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about the secret board meetings. The conversations about restructuring out the legacy overhead. The corporate buyer you've been negotiating with behind my back." Michael's face went pale. "You can't possibly—" "Your mother hired a private investigator," I said calmly. "For 6 months, she documented every conversation, every meeting, every betrayal. She knew what you were planning long before I did." Amanda grabbed her purse. "Michael, we should go." "No," I said firmly. "You came here to make me sign my company away. The least you can do is hear why that's never going to happen." I opened Margaret's folder and pulled out the first transcribed phone call. Once Dad is isolated and vulnerable, he'll sign anything we put in front of him. Old people always do. Your words, Michael, to your wife about your father. Michael stood up, his corporate composure finally cracking. Dad, you're taking that out of context. Context. I pulled out another document. Here's more context. The letter of intent you signed with Hammond Construction to sell Mitchell & Sons for $18 million, with a clause stating the sale is contingent on my voluntary retirement or incapacitation. Amanda was already at the door. Michael stood frozen, his carefully constructed narrative collapsing around him. You have 48 hours to resign from the board, I said quietly. After that, I'm filing a lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted elder exploitation. You can't do that, Michael said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I'm your son. You stopped being my son the day you decided I was just an obstacle to your profit margin. Now, you're just a board member who tried to steal from the company. And Margaret made sure I have every legal tool I need to stop you. After they left, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. The folder was still on the table, filled with evidence of betrayal I'd never wanted to collect. But Margaret had known better. She'd known that some families are built on love and others are built on ledgers. That night, I called the lawyer whose name Margaret had left in the folder. Patricia Chen had been preparing for this call for 2 years. Mr. Mitchell, she said when I identified myself, your wife was a remarkable woman. She anticipated every move your son might make. She was always smarter than me, I said. Smart enough to protect you even after she was gone. Let's talk about your options. What I learned in Patricia's office the next morning rewrote everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Margaret hadn't just documented Michael's betrayal. She'd systematically protected every asset we'd built together. The house was in an irrevocable trust, managed by Patricia's firm, with Jasmine as the sole beneficiary. Michael couldn't touch it. The company stock Margaret owned wasn't in Michael's name or even mine anymore. It was in a voting trust that I controlled as trustee, but with provisions that prevented any sale or transfer without Jasmine's consent once she turned 25. Your wife essentially built a firewall around your legacy, Patricia explained. Michael can't sell the company without your stock, plus Margaret's trust shares. And the trust shares can't be used for a sale that doesn't benefit Jasmine's long-term interests. So all of Michael's negotiations with Hammond, worthless unless you cooperate. And now that you know about them, cooperation would constitute fraud against Jasmine's trust. I leaned back in Patricia's leather chair, overwhelmed by the complexity of Margaret's protection. She'd spent 2 years building legal walls I didn't even know existed, all while smiling at Michael's corporate presentations and nodding through his business school theories about maximizing shareholder value. There's more, Patricia said, pulling out another folder. Margaret established a scholarship fund for construction workers' children. $2 million, administered through the company, with specific provisions that if Mitchell & Sons is sold to a corporate buyer, the entire fund gets distributed immediately to your current employees. She made selling the company expensive, I said, understanding dawning. She made selling the company to vultures like Hammond impossible. Any buyer would have to assume a $2 million immediate liability, plus deal with the trust restrictions, plus negotiate with a workforce that would suddenly have no incentive to stay. Your wife made the corporate raiders go away by making your company unprofitable to strip and sell. I thought about Margaret in her study, planning all of this while I was oblivious, building legal fortifications while I was building houses, protecting our legacy while I was trusting our son. What do I do now? I asked. Patricia smiled with the satisfaction of a lawyer executing a perfect strategy. Now? Now you take back your company, and we make sure Michael learns a very expensive lesson about trying to exploit his father's grief. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. I arrived early, dressed in the suit Margaret had bought me for our anniversary, carrying a briefcase full of documents that would end Michael's corporate ambitions permanently. The board consisted of 6 people, myself with 60% voting control, Michael with 10%, 3 outside directors with 5% each, and Margaret's trust shares at 15%, which I now controlled as trustee. Michael had clearly prepped the outside directors. They looked uncomfortable as I took my seat at the head of the table. "Gentlemen, lady," I began, nodding to Sarah Kim, our corporate counsel. "Thank you for gathering on short notice. We have some urgent business to discuss." Michael started to speak, but I held up my hand. "Your turn to listen, son. You've been talking behind my back for 6 months. Now it's my turn to talk to your face." I distributed copies of the private investigator's transcripts. The board members' expressions changed as they read, from uncomfortable to horrified. These documents show that Michael Mitchell, while serving as COO and board member, has been negotiating a sale of this company without board approval or majority shareholder consent. He's been conducting secret board discussions about removing me as CEO during my wife's terminal illness. And he's been conspiring with outside buyers to, quote, restructure out the legacy overhead, meaning me. Sarah Kim looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. "Mr. Mitchell, I had no idea." "I know you didn't, Sarah. Margaret's investigation showed that Michael kept the lawyers in the dark deliberately. He knew what he was doing was illegal, so he hid it from counsel." I turned to Michael, who sat frozen in his chair, his corporate mask finally shattered. "You have a choice, son. Resign from the board immediately with a confidential separation agreement, or I file criminal charges for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The evidence is already with the district attorney's office, waiting for my call." Michael found his voice. "Dad, please, think about Jasmine. Think about your granddaughter." "I am thinking about Jasmine. That's why your mother set up a trust that keeps you from stealing her inheritance. That's why I'm removing you from a company you tried to sell without permission. I'm teaching Jasmine that actions have consequences, even for family." Amanda wasn't in the room, but I knew she was waiting in the parking lot, probably already calculating how to spin this for their country club friends. "The separation agreement is simple," Patricia said, sliding papers across the table. "You resign all positions with Mitchell & Sons. You sell your 10% stake back to the company at fair market value. You sign a non-compete preventing you from working in construction in this state for 5 years. And you never contact any Hammond construction executive again." "And if I don't?" Michael asked, but his voice was defeated. "Then I spend my retirement fund prosecuting you for fraud. Your mother left me plenty of money for legal fees. The question is whether you want this to be a quiet resignation or a public scandal." Michael signed the papers with shaking hands. As he stood to leave, he looked at me with something between hatred and grief. "She turned you against me," he said. "Mom poisoned you. Your mother protected me," I interrupted. "From the son who saw his father as a resource to liquidate. She didn't turn me against you. She just documented who you really are." After Michael left, the board meeting continued. We discussed succession planning, real planning this time, not corporate coup plotting. Sarah recommended bringing in an interim COO while we searched for someone who understood that Mitchell & Sons was a legacy company, not a corporate acquisition target. "Someone who understands that we build things that last," I said, "not just quarterly profits." The board meeting ended with unanimous support. Funny how unanimous things become when the conspiracy is exposed. That evening, I drove to Jasmine's college apartment. She was a junior at Michigan State, studying architecture with the same passion Margaret had brought to every project we'd worked on together. "Grandpa," she said, hugging me at the door, "Mom said you and Dad had some kind of fight." "Your dad and I had a reckoning," I corrected gently. "Come on, I need to tell you some things your grandmother wanted you to know." We sat in her small living room with its architecture textbooks and model buildings, and I told her everything about Michael's betrayal. About Margaret's preparation, about the trust that now held her inheritance safe from her father's ambitions. Jasmine listened with tears streaming down her face. Grandma knew. All this time, she knew, and she protected you. Not just with money, but with wisdom. She wanted you to understand the difference between building a legacy and cashing it out. What happens to the company now? I pulled out the letter Margaret had left for Jasmine, sealed and waiting for this conversation. Your grandmother has some things to tell you herself. But the short version is, Mitchell & Sons will exist until you're ready to decide its future. At 25, you'll control the trust shares. You'll decide whether we stay independent or whether the legacy ends. But it will be your choice, made with full information, not your father's choice made in secret while I was grieving. Jasmine opened her grandmother's letter and read in silence. I watched emotions play across her face, grief, pride, determination, love. When she finished, she looked up at me with Margaret's eyes. Grandpa, I want to join the company. After graduation, learn the business the way you and Grandma built it. Not the MBA way, the real way. Your father has an MBA, I said gently. Look where that got him. Exactly, Jasmine said. Grandma writes here that you can teach me something more valuable than business school ever could. She says you can teach me the difference between building equity and building community. I want to learn that. I thought about Margaret's final wisdom, about the legacy she'd protected and the granddaughter she'd prepared to receive it, about the son who'd learned to calculate profit but never learned to count what mattered. Then you'll start on Monday, I said. Entry level. I don't care if you're going to own the trust shares eventually. You'll learn every job, every position, every skill, just like I did. Jasmine smiled through her tears, just like Grandma would have wanted. The next 6 months transformed everything. Jasmine dropped to part-time classes so she could work full-time at Mitchell & Sons. She started in the office, learning estimating and project management. Then I put her on job sites, learning framing and concrete work, and all the skills that made a construction company real. The crews loved her. She showed up early, stayed late, asked questions that showed she was listening, not just performing. She had Margaret's gift for seeing how projects fit together, for understanding that every worker mattered to the whole. Michael tried to contact her once. She blocked his number. Grandpa, she told me, I can't respect someone who tried to steal from his own father. Grandma's letter was clear about that. She said some people see family as people to protect, and others see family as assets to exploit. Dad chose wrong. Meanwhile, I began spending weekends at Margaret's property in North Carolina. The workshop she'd built was everything she'd promised, a space to breathe, to create, to remember that I was more than just the CEO of Mitchell & Sons. I started building furniture. Chairs, tables, cabinets, things that would last. Things made with hands that had built houses and hospitals and schools, now making smaller things with the same care. Ana Rodriguez, the property manager Margaret had hired, checked on me every few days at first, then became a friend. She was a widow too, and we'd sit on the porch in the evenings talking about the people we'd lost and the lives we were rebuilding. Your wife planned all this, Ana told me one evening. She came here 5 times before she got sick. Designing the workshop, planning the garden, making sure you'd have a place to heal. She was always 3 steps ahead, I said. She was always taking care of you, Ana corrected, even after she knew she'd be gone. 1 year after Margaret's death, I stood in the workshop she'd built and understood her final gift. She hadn't just saved my company or protected my assets. She'd given me permission to be more than Mitchell & Sons, to be Robert Mitchell, the man who built things because he loved building, not because he was proving anything to anyone. Jasmine called during one of those workshop weekends. Grandpa, I have a proposal for you, for the company. I'm listening. What if we restructured Mitchell & Sons into a worker-owned cooperative? The trust shares could be held collectively by the employees, with you and eventually me as managing trustees. It would protect the company from corporate buyers forever. Give the workers real stake in what they build, and honor what you and Grandma always said about community. I thought about Margaret, about her scholarship fund and her voting trust, and all the ways she'd worked to protect not just me, but everyone who depended on Mitchell & Sons. Your grandmother would love that idea. I said, I know, Jasmine replied. I found her notes about it in some old files. She'd been researching worker cooperatives for 2 years. I think she wanted you to suggest it, but she ran out of time. I finished. So I'm suggesting it for her. What do you think? What did I think? I thought about 40 years of building with men and women who deserved to own what they created. I thought about Margaret's vision of a company that couldn't be sold because it was collectively owned by the people who made it real. I think we should call Patricia Chen and start drafting the paperwork, I said. The transformation of Mitchell & Sons from a privately held company to a worker-owned cooperative took 8 months of legal work and employee education. Patricia warned me that Michael would probably challenge it. Let him, I said. Margaret's trust documents give Jasmine and me the authority to restructure the company in the trust's best interests. Worker ownership protects the trust value while ensuring the company survives. Any judge will see that. Michael did try to sue. His lawsuit claimed I was destroying shareholder value and breaching my fiduciary duty. The judge dismissed it in 15 minutes, pointing out that I was the majority shareholder and had every right to restructure my own company. Mr. Mitchell, the judge said, looking at Michael with barely concealed contempt. Your father is ensuring his workers have ownership stake in their labor. That's not destruction of value. That's creation of value. Case dismissed. On the day we finalized the cooperative structure, I gathered all 150 employees in the main warehouse. Jasmine stood beside me, Margaret's letter in her hands. 43 years ago, I began. My wife Margaret and I started this company with one truck and a dream. We built it on the principle that if you do good work and treat people right, success follows. Today, we're making that principle permanent. I explained the cooperative structure, how each employee would become a member owner, how profits would be shared, how decisions would be made collectively, while Jasmine and I maintained trustee oversight to ensure stability. This means nobody can sell Mitchell & Sons out from under you, I said. Not me, not my family, not some corporate raider looking for assets to strip. This company belongs to the people who make it real. To you, the applause was deafening. Workers who'd been with me for decades had tears in their eyes. Younger workers who were just learning the trade looked around with new understanding of what they were building. After the meeting, Jasmine read Margaret's letter publicly for the first time. To my Mitchell & Sons family, if Robert is reading this to you, it means he's chosen to share ownership the way we always dreamed. It means he's turned our company into something that will outlast us both. I've watched this company grow from a single truck to a fleet. More importantly, I've watched it grow from a business into a community. You've celebrated with us, grieved with us, built alongside us for decades. This cooperative structure ensures that what we built together stays together. No corporate buyer can destroy it. No family dispute can dismantle it. It belongs to the people who swing the hammers and pour the concrete and draw the plans. Robert and I built Mitchell & Sons as a family business. Today you're making it a true family, not of blood but of shared purpose and collective ownership. Build well. Treat each other right. Remember that every foundation you pour and every wall you raise says something about who you are. And when Jasmine takes my place in leadership, treat her the way you treated me, as an equal partner in something worth protecting, with gratitude and love. Margaret Mitchell. The cooperative thrived. Within a year, productivity was up 30% because workers were invested in outcomes, not just paychecks. Safety incidents dropped because owners protect each other differently than employees protect employees. Recruitment became easier because word spread about the construction company where workers actually owned what they built. Jasmine graduated and became assistant project manager, working her way toward the leadership role Margaret had envisioned. She was learning not just from me, but from the workers who'd been building longer than she'd been alive. Your grandmother knew, I told her one day on a job site, watching her consult with a framing crew about modifications. She knew the business would survive if it belonged to everyone, not just to us. She knew a lot of things, Jasmine said, including that you'd need time to heal before you could see the path forward. I thought about the workshop in North Carolina, About the furniture I built there, about the man I was becoming in Margaret's absence. She'd given me permission to grieve, to step back, to discover that I was more than my company. And in doing so, she'd given me the freedom to transform that company into something that would outlast me. Michael tried to reconcile once. He showed up at my house unannounced, Amanda and their divorce papers both conspicuously absent. "Dad," he said, standing on the porch like a stranger, "I want to apologize. Really apologize, not the corporate kind." "I'm listening," I said, not inviting him in. "I lost my way. I started seeing everything as a transaction. I forgot that you were my father before you were a business asset. I forgot that some things matter more than money." "Your mother tried to teach you that," I said quietly. "I tried to teach you that. You chose to learn different lessons." "I know," Michael said, and I could see genuine remorse in his eyes. Not the performative kind Amanda had probably coached him in, but the real thing. "I'm in therapy now, working through why I needed to prove I was smarter than you, why I needed to own everything instead of building something." "That's good," I said. "Genuine self-reflection is valuable." "Can I?" he started, then stopped. "Can I earn my way back? Not to the company. I know that's done, but to the family?" I thought about Margaret's letters, about her wisdom regarding boundaries and second chances, about how she'd made provisions for reconciliation if it was genuine, but had protected me from manipulation if it wasn't. "Earn your way back to Jasmine first," I said. "Prove to your daughter that you can see her as a person instead of a disappointment for choosing me over you. Prove you can celebrate her success without needing to control it. If you can do that, we'll talk." Michael nodded slowly. "That's fair. More than fair." He left without asking for anything else. I watched him drive away and felt something unexpected. Hope. Not hope that he'd suddenly become the son I'd imagined, but hope that he might become a decent man despite his mistakes. 2 years after Margaret's death, I sat in the mountain workshop she'd built, crafting a rocking chair for Jasmine's first apartment. The wood was maple, strong and flexible, the kind that lasts generations. Anna stopped by with fresh coffee and her usual wisdom. "You seem peaceful," she observed. "I am," I said, surprised by the truth of it. "Margaret gave me a gift I didn't understand at first. She gave me a way to lose everything that mattered and discover I was still whole." "She gave you a soft place to land," Anna said, "so you could jump without fear." That night I called Jasmine. "How's the cooperative?" I asked. "Thriving. The workers just voted to expand our apprenticeship program. We're going to train 20 new people next year with full ownership stakes after they complete their training. Your grandmother would be proud." "I know. Grandpa, there's something I want to tell you." I waited, hearing the nervousness in her voice. "Dad called me. He wants to meet, no agenda, no demands, just coffee and conversation." "What do you think?" I thought about Margaret's final letter, about the provision she'd made for conditional reconciliation, about how she'd known that Michael might eventually understand what he'd lost and why. "I think," I said carefully, "that you should meet him if you want to, not if you feel obligated to. And I think you should remember that forgiveness is different from restoration. You can forgive someone without giving them back the trust they broke." "Grandma wrote something like that in one of her letters," Jasmine said. "She said that some relationships can heal and others can only be released with love." "Your grandmother was smarter than both of us," I said. "She prepared for everything," Jasmine agreed, "including the possibility that we might all eventually find our way to something like peace." 3 years after Margaret's funeral, I stood in our cemetery on a crisp autumn morning, looking at the headstone we'd chosen together years before. Margaret Mitchell, builder of community, protector of legacy, beloved beyond measure. Jasmine stood beside me, and beside her hesitantly stood Michael. He'd earned his way back slowly, proving through consistent action that he'd learned what business school never taught, that some things have value beyond their price. "Mom knew," Michael said quietly. "The first time he'd spoken to me at Margaret's grave, she knew I was becoming someone I wouldn't be proud of. She tried to show me, but I was too arrogant to see. She loved you anyway, I said. She just loved me and Jasmine more than she loved your potential to hurt us. I'm grateful for that, Michael said. For the boundaries she set. They saved me from myself. We stood in silence for a while. 3 generations of Mitchell's understanding at different depths what Margaret had known all along. That real love protects people from harm, even harm they might cause themselves. As we walked back to our cars, Jasmine asked the question I'd been expecting. Grandpa, when are you ready to retire for real? Let someone else run Mitchell & Sons while you build furniture and find peace. I thought about the cooperative, thriving and stable, about the workers who owned their labor and their future, about the legacy Margaret and I had built that was now bigger than either of us. Next year, I said, when you're ready to step up as managing trustee. When the transition is natural instead of forced. When I can step back, knowing the company will build things that matter with people who care. Grandma planned for this too, Jasmine said, pulling a letter from her bag. She left this with Patricia to be given to you when you were ready to let go. I took the envelope, knowing before I opened it what Margaret would say. She'd known I'd hold on too long if I didn't have permission to release my grip. She'd known I'd need her voice telling me it was okay to build smaller things, to live a quieter life. To be Robert Mitchell the man, instead of Robert Mitchell the CEO. The letter was short. My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, you're finally ready to let go. I'm proud of you for holding on long enough to protect what mattered. And I'm proud of you for recognizing when holding on becomes holding back. You built something beautiful. Now let Jasmine carry it forward while you build beautiful things in your workshop. Let the cooperative prove that your legacy doesn't require your constant oversight. You've been the CEO long enough. Now be the grandfather, the craftsman, the man who has time to sit on porches and watch sunsets and remember that you're more than your accomplishments. I'll be waiting wherever I am to hear about the furniture you build and the peace you find and the life you live when you're no longer performing for anyone. Build well, my love, Margaret. I stood there in the cemetery parking lot, reading my wife's permission to rest, and felt the weight of 43 years of responsibility finally lifting. Next spring, I told Jasmine. We'll make it official next spring. You'll become managing trustee of the cooperative, and I'll become the old man in the workshop who occasionally tells stories about the old days. Grandma would like that, Jasmine said. Your grandmother planned for that, I corrected. She planned for everything except how much we'd miss her. Michael touched my shoulder awkwardly, the first physical contact we'd had since the betrayal. Dad, for what it's worth, I'm glad she protected you from me. I'm glad she loved you enough to see what I was becoming. I'm glad too, son. And I'm glad you're becoming someone different now. The drive back to the mountain house took 3 hours. Anna had dinner waiting, her own quiet way of caring for the grieving man who'd become her friend. You look lighter, she observed as we sat on the porch with coffee. Like you finally put down something heavy. Margaret gave me permission to retire, I said, showing her the letter. She knew I'd need it in writing. Anna read in silence, then smiled with the wisdom of someone who'd also learned to live after loss. She knew you very well. Better than I knew myself, I admitted. That night, I slept deeper than I had since Margaret's death. No dreams of board meetings or construction schedules, just peaceful darkness and the sound of mountain wind through the trees. The transition happened in stages over the next 6 months. I taught Jasmine everything I knew about reading people, about knowing when a contract was fair and when it was a trap, about the difference between building cheap and building right. Your grandmother and I always said the same thing, I told her during one of our last days working together at the office. If you wouldn't want to live in it, don't build it. If you wouldn't want your name on it, don't sign it. If you wouldn't want your workers treated that way, don't allow it. Simple rules, Jasmine said. Simple rules that took me 40 years to really understand, I corrected. Your grandmother understood them from day one. She was always the moral compass while I was learning to be the businessman. The official retirement ceremony was held at the main warehouse on a spring morning that reminded me of the day. Margaret and I had opened our first real office. The Cooperative members gathered, 150 workers who now owned the company they built. Jasmine stood at the podium, ready to accept the managing trustee position. I sat in the front row, Michael beside me, both of us there to witness the passing of something Margaret had protected so carefully. My grandfather built Mitchell & Sons with his hands, Jasmine began. My grandmother built it with her wisdom. Together, they created something that couldn't be bought or sold or stolen because it belonged to all of us. She talked about the cooperative structure, about Margaret's vision, about the legacy that would outlive us all. When she finished, the workers voted unanimously to accept her as managing trustee. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She called me to the podium. "Grandpa, the cooperative has a gift for you, from all of us." They unveiled a bronze plaque that would hang in the main office. Robert Mitchell, founder and builder, who understood that the best foundations are built on trust, not just concrete. Mitchell & Sons Construction Cooperative, 1981 present. I stood there looking at my name cast in bronze, at the words that reduced 43 years to 2 lines, and understood what Margaret had been teaching me all along. That legacy isn't about how long you hold on, but about what you build that can stand without you. "Thank you," I said to the assembled workers. "For 43 years, you've made me look smarter than I am, better than I was, and more successful than I deserved. You built this company as much as I did. Now you own it. Build something worth owning." The applause followed me out of the warehouse and into the parking lot where my truck waited. Not the company truck anymore, just my truck. The one I'd drive back to the mountains, to the workshop, to the life Margaret had prepared for me. Jasmine walked me out. "You okay, Grandpa?" "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. She knew I'd need to fight to keep the company before I could trust myself to let it go. She knew a lot of things, Jasmine agreed, but mostly she knew you. And she knew that you'd need proof that the company could survive without you before you'd let yourself rest. I hugged my granddaughter, this young woman who carried Margaret's wisdom and my work ethic and her own fierce intelligence. "Make me proud," I said. "I will," she promised, "because Grandma's watching, and she doesn't accept anything less than excellence." The drive to North Carolina felt different this time. Not like running away or hiding from something, but like coming home. The workshop Margaret built was waiting, the tools organized exactly as she'd known. I'd want them. Anna came by that evening with wine, and the comfortable silence of friendship that doesn't require constant conversation. "So, you're really retired," she said. "I'm really free," I corrected. "Margaret spent 2 years preparing me for this freedom. I'm finally ready to accept it." "What will you build?" I thought about the furniture I'd been making, about the rocking chair waiting for Jasmine, about the cabinets I wanted to craft for the church, about all the small beautiful things I could make now that I wasn't building empires. "Things that last," I said. "Things made with care instead of deadline pressure. Things that won't have my name on a bronze plaque, but will have my hands in every joint and corner." "Margaret would approve," Anna said. "Margaret planned it," I reminded her. "Right down to this porch and this view and this moment." We sat watching the sunset over the mountains, and I thought about the journey from that kitchen table where Michael had tried to steal my company to this porch, where I'd finally learned to let it go. Margaret had known the entire path. She'd known I'd need to fight before I could rest, needed to win before I could walk away, needed to prove the company could survive without me before I'd believe I could survive without it. The phone in my pocket buzzed. A text from Jasmine. "First day as managing trustee complete. You built something beautiful, Grandpa. Now go build beautiful things for yourself. Grandma's orders. Love you." I smiled and pocketed the phone. Tomorrow I'd start on a dining table for Anna, who'd mentioned her old one was falling apart. Next week I'd finish the rocking chair for Jasmine. The week after, I'd start on whatever project called to me. For the first time in 43 years, I had time. Time to build without deadlines, time to create without committees, time to live without proving anything to anyone. Margaret had given me that gift, wrapped in legal documents and strategic planning and letters that kept teaching me even after she was gone. As night settled over the mountains, I went inside to my workshop. Margaret's photograph hung above the workbench, her smile captured in a moment of pure joy from some job site 20 years ago. "Thank you," I said to the photograph, to the memory, to the woman who'd loved me enough to teach me how to live without her. For everything, for seeing what I couldn't see, for protecting what I couldn't protect, for preparing me for a life I didn't know I needed. The workshop was quiet, except for the sound of my breathing and the distant conversation of night birds. I picked up a piece of cherry wood, felt its grain beneath my fingers, and began to plan my next project. Not a building that would last 100 years. Just a box, simple and beautiful, lined with cedar and finished with care. A box to hold Margaret's letters, all the wisdom she'd left behind, all the love that had prepared me for this moment. I worked until midnight, measuring and cutting and sanding, losing myself in the meditation of craft. When I finally stopped, exhausted and content, the box was taking shape. It would take weeks to finish properly, but I had weeks now. I had time. That's what Margaret had really given me. Not just protection from Michael's greed or financial security or a company that would outlive me. She'd given me time. Time to grieve, time to heal, time to discover who Robert Mitchell was when he wasn't running a construction empire. I locked the workshop and walked back to the house, where a comfortable bed and peaceful sleep waited. Tomorrow I'd wake up and build, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Not to prove anything or achieve anything or leave some grand legacy, just to build, because that's what I loved. That's what Margaret had always known I loved, beneath the business and the success and the empire. She'd stripped all that away and left me with the essential truth. I was a builder. Not a CEO or a company founder or a bronze plaque on a wall. Just a man who loved to make things with his hands, and that, finally, was enough. True family legacy isn't measured in company valuations or bronze plaques or how many buildings bear your name. It's measured in whether you taught the next generation to build with integrity, to protect the vulnerable, to understand that some things matter more than profit margins. Robert Mitchell learned what his wife Margaret had known all along, that the greatest legacy is preparing people you love to thrive without you, and teaching them the difference between building empires and building character. Before you go, ask yourself, are you building something that serves your ego or something that serves your values? If this story made you think about what you're really constructing with your life's work, subscribe for more stories about legacy, integrity, and the wisdom of knowing when to hold on and when to let go.